Rolling.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Reference Point. I'm your host, Dave Cokerhook, and this evening we're going to be speaking with author Sharyn Ayn. Sharyn is a very interesting person. You're going to find out some fascinating stuff about her through the book that she has written called I can't even read that without my glasses on. Create Your Own Reality, the Ancient Wisdom. Create Your Own Reality. And Sharyn, you and I have known each other for a little less than a year now, actually, and when you told me about your book, I had an opportunity to read it recently, and I was amazed. This is really a life's journey book, isn't it?
It is. It absolutely is. One of the things that I found over the years is that everybody is subjected to challenges, and the difference is, I look at like siblings, like I have an older sister and a younger brother, and it always mystified me why people from the same house with the same parents, virtually the same tool set, would turn out so completely different.
Yeah, I wondered that myself. I've had that in my family.
So I have a friend who's a physicist, and he says it's your DNA. So then the question is, does that mean you're stuck with what you have in your life? And so I'd set out to prove everyone different. So one of the things that I had were parents that really didn't have good parenting skills. Obviously, their parents didn't have good parenting skills. And I never understood until doing all this research and working with a lot of different people that typically people will just mimic what they learned as children from their parents, good or bad. And so if you take people who go through life imitating what their parents did, even when they didn't like it, then we keep, this generation we have 2, next generation we have 4, and we keep replicating bad behaviors.
Absolutely. And so you look to find a way to break the cycle.
Exactly.
So tell me a little bit about that with respect to your writing of the book. Why did you do this book? What was it that motivated you to take this experience in your life and commit it to print, and what do you hope that's going to do for people?
Well, it actually has a multiple answer for that. I had talked about writing this book for the last 2 years, and I couldn't do it. I would sit down to write and my mind would go blank. And I'm really disciplined. Every Saturday morning, sit and write for 2.5 hours, and I just love the process of writing, so I'd end up writing poems instead. Wasn't getting me anywhere, but that's what I'd end up doing. And then 2 years ago, my brother ended up very seriously ill, and I decided to take the responsibility of getting him through this health crisis. And he was so ill that we all knew that he wasn't going to make it. So just before Christmas, I said, okay, I've got to write the book. So 6 weeks later, the book was done.
Whoa, 6 weeks?
6 weeks later, the book was done. And it's more of a hellacious schedule than most people would want to commit to, but it was something that I was bound and determined to finish it before he passed, which I barely got it done 3 days before he was gone. And so the book is dedicated to my brother, but it's also the premise of what I was exposed to. So in 12 years, from 1991 until 4 years ago, I had every organ in my body fail because an emergency doctor gave me a tetanus shot with an antibiotic that caused Epstein-Barr virus. So hard failure, so kidney failure, spleen failure, I had breast cancer, I had a heart attack because a nutritionist told me to be strictly vegetarian but forgot to tell me you have to have fat in your diet. And so the process of the book is the journey of what I had to learn to take the responsibility for my own health, my own sense of well-being, and the gift that I earned from that was having of everybody who is ever coming into my life since, they have a mother, a brother, a father, a neighbor, someone who has been told that they have a life-threatening disease and that there's no answer, when in fact there's nothing in your body that was there 7 years ago.
That's true.
So when I was told I had muscular dystrophy and I couldn't walk a block, I'm thinking, how is that possible that that's going to stop me just because someone tells me, when Deepak Chopra says there's nothing in your body that was there 7 years ago. So then I thought, well, there's no excuse for terminal or chronic illness. So I started looking for all the answers, started trying to figure out what could I do to be more empowered, to have more control over my life.
So is that where the ancient wisdom comes from then?
No, the ancient wisdom, my subtitles always come in a very strange way for me. So I knew the book was called Create Your Own Reality because I've been doing that talk in front of unemployed people since 1992. And I challenge unemployed people to not go back and get another job so that they can get laid off one more time. So I was looking for quotes from orators, so Caesar and Plato and Socrates, and what I stumbled upon is 2,000 years ago, these ancient wisdom people were dealing with the same challenges, the same exact things that we're dealing with today. So just like the family turning out kids that are completely different, how is it over 2,000 years we haven't found solutions to relationships and money issues and being happy in life? And so that's what the ancient wisdom came from, is all the quotes. So I start every chapter with a quote from somebody who is very well known, and it relates to things like transformation and resistance and judgment. All the different emotional things that we're trying to deal with.
Which are the things, the challenges that we as humans face on a day-to-day basis, and we get all emotional about it, and we actually do create our own challenges as a result of it. So if you can create the problem, you can certainly create the solution.
And that's what people miss. So everybody thinks, I have a job, I don't like it, but I'm stuck because I have to have the income. So they spend 1/3 of their life working at a job that does nothing for them other than give them a paycheck. But what it does do is it wears them out physically and mentally, emotionally. More heart attacks happen on Monday morning than 6.5 days of the week combined. Well, this is wrong. We only have 1 in 8 people in this country that do something for their income that they enjoy. It's completely backwards. I can understand students, and I can understand people, they're waiting to find what it is that really appeals to them, but not 7 out of 8 people going through their whole life,
and I think that's the key thing. There's a difference between being in a time of transition and doing something that you need to do in order to sustain yourself through a time of transition, and just sort of abdicating any responsibility for making a positive change in your life. So it's really interesting. You talk about some of these scenarios and that challenge of having to go to do something on a day-to-day basis that doesn't fulfill you in some way, shape, or form. The level of stress that creates is huge in a person, and that is one of the main contributors to physical deterioration and mental deterioration is stress.
You're absolutely right. So they know that stress is the #1 killer in this country. Heart attack is caused by stress. Cancer is caused by stress. And where does stress come from? You've heard me say this. We make it up. It's all in our imagination. So if we make it up, why can't we stop making it up? Why can't we look at something and say, well, this is a challenge, so I must need to change this. How do I go about changing it? How do I bring people into my life that will help me change it so that I don't have to go through this next year and the year after? All these people who wait, they go, okay, when I retire, then I'll start living my life. Well, the fact is that most people who do that are actually dead within 2 years of when they retire.
Because they identify themselves with what it is that their career was.
And there's this kind of a yo-yo, kind of a pendulum effect when you've lived in this much stress your whole life, and then you retire and it stops. Your body physically doesn't know what to do with it.
Makes sense. So you really put a lot of your own experience into the pages of the book. And I'm curious to, I mean, it's sort of like a total reveal of self. There isn't much that isn't. And I'm impressed and somewhat surprised by, the fact that you were comfortable in doing that. I mean,
I found this really interesting about what Johnny Carson was on 15 years ago, somewhere in that neighborhood. And one of his last guests within the last 6 months was Charlie Sheen. And Charlie Sheen was talking about when he was a kid in New York, they used to sneak out and go steal hubcaps. And I'm like, oh my God, he admitted on national television with 200 million people that he was stealing hubcaps as a kid. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, if he could admit that, what in my life do I have to hide? Because everything that we experience is on purpose. It's perfect. So every experience we have is to lead us to the next thing we need to learn. And instead of hiding from it or being resistant to it, if we embrace it, then the stress goes away, and then we can see the miracle of what that experience is really meant to be.
So you're using your experiences and the layers of, I don't know what the right term is, maybe enlightenment, maybe recognition, maybe change, okay, the layers of change that you went through as something that others can look at and say, if she can do it, maybe I can do it too?
Absolutely. Anybody has complete choice on how they live their life, whether they have a great relationship or they dread going home every day. You know, whether they're extremely overweight and they go home and they just eat all the junk food in the house, you know, or they look out for their body and they honor what's going on in their body. Every time that we do anything, it is a choice. I can get up in the morning, I can stay in bed. So if we look at every day as a do-over, like the City Slickers movie,
oh, yeah,
right?
Sure, right, yeah.
So if we look at that as a do-over and we think, okay, today I get to start brand new. Whatever happened before today doesn't matter. It's just a lesson.
And then if you learn the lesson,
you get to move on to the next one.
And what if you don't?
Usually you do. I really believe, well, in my life as an example, if you don't have new lessons, you're ready to go. So the lessons keep coming so that we get more well-rounded. We learn how to deal with things that are completely adversarial to our common belief. And we're all exposed to so many different ideas, you know, whether it's political or religious or spiritual or styles of life or whatever. There's not one person on this earth who has earned the right to judge any other person.
Sure.
And how many people spend so much of their time agonizing over each person that doesn't match what they do.
Right, right. Yeah, and that's part of the problem. That's why we have so many people shooting at each other and things.
Isn't that something?
One of the things that what was very interesting to me in the book, about the book, let's say, was that you touch on, because my sense is that you had the opportunity to investigate so many different therapies, physical therapies, spiritual perspectives, mental viewpoints and things like that. And that fascinated me because, you know, you hear about the people who are searching, you know, the searchers and the seekers and the finders. And so talk to me a little bit about that and what led you through so many different investigative processes.
Well, it started in 1985 when I went through my second divorce. And being raised Catholic, boy, that was a big no-no. And my parents actually banned me from going home for 5 years.
Well, there you go.
So I had a lot of free time. So what I ended up doing is I went to every church I could find, except the Mormon. I couldn't find anybody to take me to a Mormon church. So I went to all these different churches thinking that I would walk in the door and I'd experience something and I would feel like I was home. But I knew that the Catholicism wasn't working for me anymore because after all, that's why I was banned from going home.
Right.
So I finally found a couple of places where I was comfortable. And in the process, I would go to a Unity church and somebody would say, well, you've got to come back on Sunday at 6 because we've got this American Indian shaman coming in to speak. And I'm like, well, that sounds interesting. You know, so I became this person who would look everywhere, no matter somebody had mentioned something, and if I heard it twice, I knew I had to pay attention. And it was really kind of a fun way of exploring different, it was safe, right? Because somebody else would say, oh, I've done it, you've got to go do this.
Sure.
So I met somebody on Saturday, I was speaking in Berkeley, and this woman was talking about breathing. She makes her entire living teaching people to breathe. which you think, I mean, this is kind of a tough sell, right?
Sort of intrinsic, you know, if you're not breathing, something else is going on. Right?
Yeah, it's kind of tough sell.
You're missing a lot.
But apparently what it does, and I've actually experienced this, is it releases deep core subconscious memories that by deep breathing, you're bringing them out. We have knee-jerk reactions to things.
Sure.
And you could sit there for days and days and ponder on them, and you'll not come up with a reason why you have these knee-jerk reactions. So my dad, and I always thought this was funny, my dad hated pork. So when I got my parents finally to come back and spend a weekend with me, I made a pork roast. I'm a Scorpio. I can't help it. Now, the really funny thing was he had 3 servings, and you know, that was like a ½ inch thick and a good 6 inches round, you know, a big, good, juicy pork roast. And at the end of the meal, he says, "You're going to have to give your mother the recipe for this roast."
And you're thinking all the time, oh, okay.
All right, so somewhere along the line, my dad had pork, and he decided for the rest of his life he didn't like it.
Yeah.
Well, how many things in our lives do we do that with?
Sure.
A person, a place, a restaurant, you know, just all these different things. So I started investigating and just becoming an info junkie. And one day, 3 different people within a week's period said, "You have to go meet this doctor from Russia." I'm thinking, well, I guess I have to. I've heard it 3 times. So I called him up, and he wanted me to come over on a Sunday, and my Sundays are kind of sacred. That's the day I don't like to be involved, because during the week normally I'm around, you know, 100 people a week.
Sure.
So I like to be really low-key on my weekends. So I go to Berkeley, and it's raining, and I meet this wonderful man from Russia, and he does a process that's a Korean process called sujak. Sujak.
Okay.
And he takes, the body is actually represented, would be your legs, the front of your legs, and this would be the back of your legs, and these would be your arms, front, the inside of your arm, and then thinking about the thumb turning around, this would be the top of your head.
Okay.
And I had a headache, and he actually came by and he pressed the top of my thumb with his fingernail, and the headache went away. Oh, well, there must be something to this.
Yeah.
So he started working with me a little bit, and so he would get me to the next step. And then I had an American Indian shaman that came and found me in a room of 500 people. And he was shaking He found me. Somebody in my business said, "Go find her. She's going to be there on Saturday."
Okay.
So out of all these people in the room, he walked up to me and he was shaking my hand. And most people don't realize this. You know that your heart pulses here, but every organ has a pulse.
Okay.
And if you can't feel that pulse there, your organ's in trouble. So your kidney, your liver, your gallbladder, everything has a pulse. So he was shaking my hand and he was checking my pulses, and I knew,
thinking, what's this guy doing?
It's up to. So he insisted on following me home. So he followed me home, and he worked on me for 3.5 hours, and this is when I had muscular dystrophy. No change at all until 4 days later the alarm didn't go off. And I jumped out of bed, and I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to be late, and I'm standing in the shower, and I went, oh my God, I jumped out of bed.
Wow.
So it was like a 4-day lag time, and what most people don't realize, they'll try something like a detox or a process, and there's this lag time for the body to catch up.
Right. Well, we tend to be an instant gratification society.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't
Microwave
get to
oven.
you, boom, right now, or give me the pill that hits me in 25 seconds and I'll be okay.
Right.
But you're talking about mentioning these 2 different experiences. There is so much knowledge that has been around for centuries, decades, thousands of years.
Ancient wisdom.
Ancient wisdom. And, you know, people in the West tend to not, for whatever reason, I don't know what it is about us, we kind of like to try to recreate the whole thing.
Hanging on to what we know.
Start from the beginning and make it all up, as opposed to, you know, integrating with some of these pieces of knowledge.
Western medicine is 200 years old.
Right.
Acupuncture is 3,000 years old.
Yeah, right.
How could we possibly think we know more than somebody who has been doing this and has a
years.
much healthier society?
Right.
And we have more heart attacks in this country than any other country in the world. We have more obesity in this country than any country in the world. the thing that just, totally different subject, and you probably know I'm passionate about this, we have more children dying of malnutrition before they're 2 in this country than all but 3 countries in the world.
Which makes absolutely no sense in the wealthiest nation in the world.
No, and the richest agricultural country in the world. So the food is not getting where it needs to be.
Right.
So one of the things that, you know, when we get out there and we get healthy and we get all this exposure, one of my beliefs in writing this book is to educate other people, to influence just where they live. To take the time and pick up the garbage off the street, or, you know, open a door for someone that wouldn't expect it, or to do something that is completely unexpected for someone, to bring a smile to their face. And change the world one person at a time, one day at a time, and find out what that feels like in your heart when you can, like T. Harv Eker is one of the people that is really well known for helping people move into another consciousness. And he always says this thing where every night before he goes to sleep he has to write 5 things he's grateful for. Can't be the same it was yesterday.
Right, it's 5 different ones, right?
5 different things every day. Well, that's kind of hard to do if you're living in your own world and you have tunnel vision.
Right.
So you have to come up with ways, like first thing, you have to start looking at something. Like one day he totally ran out of things to do, and so he offered to dry the dishes for his wife. And she was completely flabbergasted, but then he got the 5th thing in the journal that day.
Good for him. So we don't have a lot of time left in the show, but I want to ask you a little bit more about the hoped for impact of what it is that you've created with the book, because you know, we've touched on it, the idea that people can impact their own lives. They don't have to be satisfied with, they don't have to be stuck in a rut. So talk to me a little bit more about what you see as possible for folks.
I think more than anything, the idea, if I can get one person in a day to realize they can change anything about their life. It doesn't matter if it's their relationship, their job, their income, one person, and that will make me happy. So if I take this book, now I realize that in this country, the average person only reads a book a year. The chances of it being my book are Eckhart Tolle out there, you know, getting all the press. So I'm going to make audio programs. I was just speaking on Saturday. So I'm doing a whole radio campaign, podcast, blog. I mean, anything I can do to have enough influence out there that people will start looking and go, wow, she's talking to me, that I can make a change today. And then to get into action. That's the one thing that people don't do. I don't care how many books they read.
Oh, yes.
You have to have a plan, and then you have to start applying it.
Application, absolutely. I mean, if you don't take the first step, you never get anywhere. And I want the viewers to understand, too, that I want them to know that they can communicate to you through us here at Reference Point. So, you know, our email address is info@referencepointtv.com. And so if anybody has any questions about you, the book, how to find the book, what to do about what you know, some of the other things that you mentioned as resources that people can go to learn some of the data, by all means, send us an email, let us know so we can communicate to Sharyn and get that back to folks. Because what you've presented here through your life, really, I mean, the book is a reflection of your life.
It is.
And what you've done is you've taken on a level of personal responsibility to enable other people to recognize what you came to realize through all the challenges that you have, and that is you don't have to succumb to a problem. You can take directive action, you can change circumstances, but you have to do something in order to achieve that. You can't just sit back and say, oh, maybe something will come down and save me. You actually have to do something on your own. Right.
You have to open the door, take the first step out the door, and from then it's just one step at a time.
Right. Okay. So what else do we want to let people know about relative to the book? You want to relate any of the interesting stories from your book?
Well, it certainly is full of stories.
Yeah, it certainly is full of stories. Absolutely.
You
know, I'm going to interrupt because one of the things that was fascinating to me was when you came to realize some of your heritage. and how important that was to your understanding of yourself and what you could do. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I've always been the person who fights for the underdog. You know, I almost purposely look for people who can't stand up and speak for themselves. So I never understood that until at 15 years old, we went on our very first and only family vacation, if you can call it that. We had 6 people packed in a 57 Plymouth.
57,
with no air conditioning, from Mendocino to Texas, to San Antonio, where my dad was from. So we get into El Paso, and my father's aunt, his mother's sister, lives in El Paso, and she takes us to the museum at Fort Bliss, where her husband worked. And we walk in, and she says, "Oh, by the way, this is your great-grandfather. And here's this bugle that's 4 feet tall, and this guy in uniform that's 4'10". And at 16 years old, he had signed in with the Army to be a musician.
Oh, wow.
And claimed the Alamo back from the Mexican revolutionists.
Oh, wow.
So I'm thinking, well, God, that's kind of where it comes from, right? So looking at all this, well, a year ago, the students at the University of Mexico City decided to dig up Zapatas.
Sure.
Right? And they found out the Zapatas were not buried there. See, if they had asked me, I would have told them that. Because Isabel Zapata is my great-great-grandmother.
Oh, wow.
So my family would not have actually started in Texas if it hadn't been for the Zapatas leaving Zapata, Mexico and ending up in San Antonio.
Go figure.
So I love the story of your history. It's his story, history. So your story, what does it really tell you about the way you relate to life today and the things that are important? And so, you know, when I get in my challenging mode, and you know, you are not going to do this to these children, and you're gonna stand up and take care of these issues, I know where this is coming from.
Because yes, it's part of the heritage.
It is.
Your history. Fantastic. Sharyn, this has been fabulous. I really appreciate that you came to the show and we talked a little bit, and I've learned a lot more and understand a lot more about you, about the book, and what your hope for the book is. And I want the audience to know, again, if you're interested in learning more about this, send us an email, info@referencepointtv.com. We'd love to share some more data with you about Sharyn, about her work. So again, thank you for being here on Reference Point. It's been a pleasure to have you here. And ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you next time, and thanks for being out there.